Sabyasachi Majumdar. As Senior Vice President and Group Head Corporate Sectors Rating, Mr. Sabyasachi Majumdar has been associated with ICRA for over 2 decades. He is responsible for ratings in the corporate and infrastructure sector, specializing in power, telecom, cement, sugar, and engineering sectors. Mr. Sabyasachi is also responsible for carrying out the integration rating of state-owned discoms on behalf of Ministry of Power and PCF and REC. He is also part of CII National Committee on Renewable Energy. Today, he will be talking about renewable energy outlook and credit challenges. So let's welcome Mr. Sabyasachi.
Basically, in my presentation, I have divided into 4 sections. Firstly, I'll be looking at the renewable energy outlook and project awards, then the key policy and regulatory developments. Then there will be something on the updates, and finally the outlook. So basically, looking at the renewable energy outlook, the overall demand drivers remain intact. So what are the key demand drivers? First of all, there is an improved tariff competitiveness. Now, we are aware of the fact that recently, after the imposition of BCD, tariffs have gone up. But even with all of that, the solar tariffs are only about 3 rupee. Wind tariffs are also going to remain below 3 rupee per unit. And this is competitive against the marginal variable cost. Of course, we are not looking at the best thermal power plant, but if you're looking at the bottom 25% of thermal power plant, there the variable cost is about 3 rupees 50 paise. So it remains competitive. There is a strong policy focus. The government intends to drive up the capacity to about 50 gigawatts. Overall, the energy outlook is positive. And of course, energy growth, demand growth has slowed down for various reasons, which you understand. But let us also remember that our per capita electricity consumption is about a third of the global average. Overall, the regulatory framework is quite supportive, and RPO policy target has been set by MNRE at 21% by FY 2020. Overall, the potential between solar and wind put together is more than 1.4 terawatts. Overall, the project award pipeline is also very strong. So right now, basically, if you see, there's a 38 gigawatt of project award pipeline as of June 2021, which will be getting commissioned over the next 2 years or so, which provides a strong visibility in renewable energy capacity addition. For the current financial year, we are expecting about 11 gigawatt of capacity addition, which will be driven mainly by the solar segment. As you can see from this graph, in 2021, the actual execution had come down. So basically, the combined solar and wind put together was only 7 gigawatts against the peak of 11 gigawatts. And this is only mainly because of execution challenges amidst the lockdown. But for this year, we have already commissioned in the first 4 months about 3 gigawatts of capacity. And to the full year, very safely, we can assume about 11 gigawatts. In terms of the overall capacity mix, is dominated by solar and wind, solar being about 44% and wind being about 40%. Biomass and bagasse is about 10%, while so small hydro supply is less than 5%. Overall, we are expecting renewable energy mix to increase, and significant investment is estimated till 2025. So right now, for instance, we have a total capacity of about 94 gigawatts, which is about 40 gigawatts each for solar and wind, and other renewable energies 15 gigawatts. By 2025, we expect solar capacity to go up to about 91 gigawatts, wind to about 51 gigawatts, and other to about 17 gigawatts. So altogether, we are expecting about 160 gigawatts by March 2025. So the share of renewables will increase to about 34% from about 25%. Although in terms of the actual generation, that energy source might remain at lesser at about 20% of gigawatts, given the fact that renewable energy has a lower PLF. Now, this additional capacity would entail capital investment of about 3.5 trillion rupees for the period till March 2025, assuming a weighted average capacity capital cost of about 5 crores per megawatt, which will be slightly higher for wind than the average as a whole. For solar, it will be a bit less. As you can see from this graph, overall there is an improved tariff competitiveness for solar and wind energy. If you look at, for example, we have plotted the actual, award tariff rate. So as you can see, even with this increase, it's likely to remain well within 3 rupees, whereas the variable cost of power procurement is much higher across the various states. Of course, these are not apple-to-apple comparison, because at the end of the day, thermal power is easily scheduled, whereas renewable energy power is intermittent, and scheduling issues are definitely there. We saw the solar power tariffs breach the 2 rupee barrier in November 2020. But again, the viability of this tariff remains linked to the movement in module prices, cost of debt tenure, and solar radiation level at the project location. And as we can see from the exhibit here, the tariff would remain viable at assuming that those winning bidders were able to source the modules at a price of about 18 to 19 cents per watt or below, an interest rate of 9%. For every 2 cents variation in the module price, the DSCR metric will vary about 6 to 7 basis points, and would also result in an increase in tariff by about 20%. While the use of high efficiency modules and trankers will increase the capital cost, the higher energy yield is likely to support the incremental cost. Although the impact may be more for the high efficiency modules and less for the trackers. What are the operating risks for wind and solar IPPs? The PLF variability is higher for wind energy projects. We have seen by and large for most of the wind, projects, we have seen, consistent pattern of underperformance with respect to P75, let alone P50. And in fact, in 2021, the generation decline was about 15% in majority of wind assets across the country. Year-on-year variation as well as month-on-month variation tends to be much higher for wind and solar, which also results in some kind of a resistance from the DISCOMs in taking up the power. What have been the key policy and regulatory? First of all, there is a greater policy focus on Make in India initiatives. There are various PLI schemes. CPSU scheme is there for procurement. Basic customs duty has been put in place, and domestic manufacturing linked to PP has been put in place. So obviously, all these measures are likely to cause an increase in the cost and tariff for developers. But on the manufacturing side, overall the policy focus is positive. APTEL is also permitting, compensation for grid curtailment. This is a very positive, development for the sector as a whole. Having said that, how strongly it is going to be implemented is likely to remain an issue of concern. But overall, directionally, is quite positive. Guidelines have been issued to the SERCs. To SERCs by the APTEL for grid curtailment, and they have basically said that they have to demonstrate a few things like the system frequency being at this level. There should be no overtake. So they have determined what are the conditions under which backing down can be done. There are certain areas which remain a concern. For example, various states have shown that at times enforcing sanctity of PPAs remains an area of concern. But there have been certain and timely implementation of reforms remains important to turning around the DISCOM finances in a sustained manner, which remains an area of concern. What have been the key trends and update of DISCOMs? Overall, we have seen that the losses were around 50,000 crores. While we don't have numbers for 2021 and 2022, there could be an increase in loss levels provided the gap which has emerged in 2021 and 22 because of lower offtake from C&I segment is not compensated by the state governments by way of higher subsidy or by the regulator by way of RA approval. So this remains quite important for financial stability of the DISCOMs. And we also believe that the overall subsidies, which is around 1 lakh crores, would increase to about 1,20,000 crores by current financial year. There have been slow progress in terms of AT&C losses. It was expected that by this time, AT&C losses would have been gone down by about 15%. But we see that the reduction in AT&C losses, while they have happened, they are much more muted than was expected, and AT&C losses still remain at somewhere in or 20% or thereabouts currently, as against the expected target of around 15%. Overall, the number of states issuing tariff orders as well as the median tariff revision has also been quite anemic in the last 2 to 3 years. In the last 2 years, which is quite understandable, but even in 2020, the pre-pandemic year, the median growth rate of tariff was very less, and the number of states which are issuing tariff orders has also been coming down. Timely payments from DISCOMs remains an area of concern. There are several states such as Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, which have shown very high number of days. Then there are states like Maharashtra, which are showing very high delays on payments to wind energy players, but relatively steady payment period to PFC. But we do believe for some of these states, money is being released by the PFC REC regulatory schemes, and this would bring down the receivables in the coming period. But we see that NTPC and SECI remain very timely paymasters to the developers, so that definitely developers are getting a lot of confidence by NTPC SECI. Overall, looking at the power sector key outlook and projected metrics, we are expecting electricity demand to grow by 6% in FY 2022, supported by a favorable expected rebound from the C&I segment. And this would support an improvement in all India PLF thermal PLF to about 57.8% in FY 2022, from about 55% in FY 2021. But this still remains below the 60% mark witnessed in 2019. The capacity addition from the thermal segment is likely to remain modest at around 67 gigawatts. And future also capacity addition is likely to take place only from the central and state-owned segment, and private sector is going to remain dominant player in this. Overall, the book losses and subsidy remain, dependence on response remains area of concern, and there are certainly certain regulatory uncertainties with respect to delaying resolution of PPA tariff for wind and solar power projects. There are also issues regarding timely issuance of tariff orders for DISCOMs, which is getting delayed, and the tariff adequacy remains a challenge. Given the coming to the final outlook segment-wise, thermal generation overall remains negative, but even within the thermal segment, credit profile of the CPSEs remains healthy, supported by presence of long-term PPAs and phosphorus tariff. Renewable energy segment overall, we see a stable outlook. There is a strong policy support, but payment delays from DISCOM remains a challenge. Transmission we see as the most stable part of the value chain, because the payments have been by and large satisfactory, and the overall regulatory challenge is also very low. Distribution remains a negative area of concern, because the credit policy or credit profile of most state-owned DISCOMs is quite weak, and liquidity support announced remains a short-term measures. And for long-term recovery, extent of tariff adequacy, efficiency improvement, and timely subsidy release will remain key. On that note, I end the presentation.